What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to talk to you about Lucid. I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So starting off with data points, we do have a couple big ones to watch for. And so on Monday, you have a couple of Fed speakers. Aside from that, Tuesday, you have JOLT numbers, manufacturing. On Wednesday, you have ADP employment, followed by Thursday, non-farm payroll and unemployment. The reason why those moved up is because Friday is a holiday, so July the 4th, Independence Day, and so forth. So it is a shorter week, but there is a lot of labor data this week. So why does that matter? Ultimately, Powell mentioned he's not really worried about the inflationary data, rather the labor. So with a lot of labor data coming out this week, that could potentially prompt the market to start estimating some cuts, again, dependent on some of the data. So again, that's going to be something to watch for. Aside from that, though, you do have most likely Trump talking quite significantly, in fact, about tariffs. So on Friday, it looks as though that the States and Canada, just things aren't jiving. So unfortunately, that did cause a little bit of a uncertainty in the market in the second half of the day. But for the most part, anticipate a lot of tariff talk as well this week. And then dependent on the results, whether they're positive or negative, that could impact the market. Specific to Lucid, though, this is what they have coming up. So it looks as though that they're still going to be in Nashville, still in Boston during the pop-up tours. Charlotte will be as well in the later part of the week as well. And then that's pretty much it. So nothing really planned, no fireside chats or anything. One thing that could move Lucid, though, is this right here. So the next sales release is going to be on Tuesday, July the 1st. So I feel like this has really moved Lucid's stock price in the past, because the last disclosure, again, this is all estimates and only for the States, but it did show 975 for Lucid. For the Airs, no Gravities. So at the same time, Lucid just started to kind of sell off. So maybe institutions did rely on this data, saw no Gravities, and that was a little bit more of a red flag. But nonetheless, this could be a good catalyst if, for whatever reason, in June, we did see a spike in, let's say, Gravities, or even just overall with Lucid. That could be something that really moves Lucid higher. But aside from that, it is going to be largely based on the tariff talk, labor data, and everything else. Going into this upcoming week, 32.23% of the free float is being shorted, works out to be 397.4 million shares. So given the trajectory, we could be seeing either Monday or Tuesday all-time high short interest numbers. So that's sitting at 32.8. So again, that could be hit possibly Monday or Tuesday, depending on what shorts do. Usually, on a side note, though, any long weekends, shorts do typically return some shares. That way they don't have to pay one day unnecessarily. So on Thursday, you might see shorts kind of return a little bit, but again, there's a lot of big data and a lot of big topics that could be brought up to cause them to either double down or kind of return. So just watch for them to be fairly active as per usual. But you do see obviously a lot of volume with Lucid. Even on Friday, it was the 10th most heavily traded stock. And honestly, that's kind of a good thing. It does go to show that big money is paying attention to Lucid, just it's waiting. People are waiting for the next big catalyst, and potentially that could be it. One thing to keep in mind, though, is obviously this upcoming week, we are going to be concluding Q2. So given Lucid's somewhat lackluster performance over the last quarter, you could see some institutions buying Lucid up. So you might see some abnormally high volume potentially Monday and Tuesday, as institutions will be buying up Lucid just to kind of rebalance. So something to keep in mind. So don't be surprised if you see a little bit higher volume. Same goes for institutional transactions on the secondary market and also the dark pool. So don't be surprised again if that's a little bit higher. With Lucid closing at $212 on Friday, that does mean that the $2 and below strike prices are in the money. So ultimately, looking here, you have 2,000 at that $2 strike price. That's pretty much chump change. That's not going to cause any bump up in the stock price come Monday. Looking forward into this upcoming week, you have 3,000 at that $2 strike price and then 11,000 at that 250. So for whatever reason, if Lucid does put out a good catalyst, moves higher to that 250 mark, you might see shorts get a little bit more active. But going back over to the calls for this upcoming week, there's a consensus for it to be roughly around that, kind of between that 2 and 250. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub 2. So again, just to somewhat keep that in mind. Aside from that, with it at 212, it did close on Friday slightly above this S2. So 211 is going to be a key pivot. Of course, if that does fail to hold, 205 will be the following support, followed by $1.88. Flip side, you do have 214, 221, and then 227 being the next strong target / resistance points. And this pivot point of 221, Lucid's actually moved up quite significantly over the last couple trading days. So you had, I believe it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, pretty much all touched that pivot point, if I remember correctly. So ultimately, that is a very strong resistance level. So just really watch for that. That could signal a little bit more of a breakout potentially for this week. But aside from that, though, one thing I did bring up, I believe, on my Friday video is that there is 0 shares available. So shorts definitely are overextended. So you might see some buying as well in the early part of the week, as institutions such as BlackRock and Vanguard will be buying up Lucid just to lend out, to kind of add some availability, because it's very profitable for those businesses. So again, you could see a nice push higher at normal volume because big money will be buying it, unfortunately, for the purposes of lending it out. So it's not really that great all that much. But aside from that, on the actual chart itself, as I've mentioned, there's not really much positives to really bring up because it is below all the key pivotal moving averages, 200, 100, and also 50. Stochastic RSI is somewhat neutral-ish, a little bit on the high end for the most part. So if Lucid does actually have a breakout with the broader market for whatever reason, let's say around that 238, which is that 50-day moving average, it would be considered rather overbought. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is 90% of stocks are rather overbought right now. So the first sign of weakness, and there's a lot of big kind of hot topics that are coming up this week, such as tariffs and labor data, that could cause some extreme volatility in the market. So don't be surprised if you see some consolidation and a very quick breakout in one day. So just somewhat keep that in mind. But 238 is that key resistance for Lucid, and usually that does result in roughly like a 20 to 30% swing, of course, if it does and is able to close above that for 2 consecutive days. So Lucid, like I said, there's a lot of good potential catalyst for Lucid to really move higher. Just it will come down to the numbers, and as well some of the sales numbers, which is coming out from the States. So let me know your general thoughts on Lucid. Where do you see things going? So ultimately, throw your price predictions in the comments below. In my opinion, I do feel, given the circumstances and everything else, Lucid will be closing between this S2 and this S3. So still a little bit more consolidation, only because I don't really feel there is enough in the broader market for Lucid to really move higher. Potentially the following week, this is where I do feel it has an opportunity to really move higher. But for this week, I think that there's just too many hot topics that could go very wrong for the broader market and cause some negative volatility. So let me know your general thoughts on Lucid. Where do you see things going? One final thing though, pop over to my Discord. It is completely free. A lot of good people talking about stocks, options, crypto, everything that you ever need. Link in the description below and also the comments. With all that, appreciate all of you watching.